Hello again, it's Matthew from Matthew North Music. Thanks for watching my latest video. And if you do enjoy these videos, please think about subscribing to the channel, maybe giving the video a like, and also clicking the little bell icon, because then that way you will be notified each time a new video is published. Right, on with today. Now, as you know, if you've watched this channel before, I'm a big fan of the BBC microcomputer. This is my original BBC that I got for Christmas in 1983 from my parents, and it's currently got the Music 5000 software running. Now, this computer's a little bit of a trigger's broom in that even though it's the one I had when I was a kid, it's had quite a few parts replaced inside it over the years, and it actually does not have its original issue 7 motherboard, because I once lent this machine to some local broadcasters and it got blown up by their pat testing. They thought it was a good idea to flash test a vintage computer. So the original motherboard failed, and I've got that in another case, because I then bought another issue 7 machine and I swapped the boards over, and then that board has since been fully restored. So anyway, hopefully at some time in the future I will do a video on that old board, old machine, and see if I can get that up and running. But for the meantime, this is my main BBC Micro. Now, a friend of mine said to me back in the summer that she had in her parents' loft a load of old computers that her father had put away back in the day. And she was trying to clear all this stuff out. She said, do you want any of this stuff? And she said, I won't be offended if you think it's rubbish and just want to take it to the dump. I said, no, I'll come and have a look. And yeah, there was a lot of interesting stuff amongst it. And I have started making a video on one of the other computers, but that will be coming along a bit later, because that's a project that's ongoing. But one of the machines that was there was this. And anybody that knows me will know this is a BBC, and you can tell compared to the other, it's got the standard BBC characteristics on it. But this is the Master, and this came out after the BBC Micro. This came out in 1986 and was very much seen as a more of a professional type machine. It had networking built into it, it had sound sockets on it, and it had more memory, and it just had more stuff basically. But I've never actually owned one of these machines, so I kind of think this would be a good little project to do a video on. And I have no idea what condition this machine's in inside, because it was in a loft that had water damage, and as you can see from the state of my t-shirt, there's a lot of dust inside this machine. So I think we're going to be in for an interesting fix, but I think the first thing we'll do is we'll whip the top off this and we'll have a look and see what's inside. I've actually got this computer on my desk in the living room, because if I was to take it out to the shed, I wouldn't get anything done because it's freezing cold. But if we take a close look, looking at those sockets then on the bottom, and you can see there's an awful lot of grot and muck in there. So it certainly does need a very good clean. And if we look at the power supply, we can certainly see a lot of corrosion and muck just on the external power connector there. So this is going to be something that's going to need a lot of TLC. But we'll have a look inside. So I'm going to remove... And if we look at the power supply connector there, there's a lot of corrosion around it. So there might be a possibility that the power supply won't even be salvageable, but we'll have a look. You can also see that there's a label there that mentions that there's a battery unit inside the computer, because this computer had a real-time clock. So I'm expecting that to probably be very corroded, and a fair chance that it may have caused some damage to the actual main computer board. Anyway, I'm ever the optimist, so the first thing I will do is I will take a screwdriver and we will take the case apart. Here's a little tip. Sometimes if you can't get the screw out of a case, if you just put a flat-edge screwdriver on the side and then put your main screwdriver in like that, then you can normally just add a little bit of friction, and that will get your stuck screw out of the slot. Okay, we've got the main 4 screws out. I think that's all we need. I'm going to turn this over, and you can possibly even hear the rattle of dust and muck. And This is the inside of our computer. Now, before I do anything else, I'm just going to show you the inside of the lid. And you can see there, it's not too bad, but I mean, it is mucky. So, you know, if nothing else, this will have a bath in some soap and water and just to clean it up. But, you know, it's got yellowing on it, it's got dust and muck, and I'm hoping to be able to get some of that off. We'll start with the power supply then, and this is very rusty, very corroded on the casing. Interestingly, the sticker here actually looks in quite good condition. Now, I have got absolutely no idea whether that's going to work or not. The first thing I will do is I will remove the power supply because I will need to recap it. And I do actually have a full set of capacitors to replace this, but there may be other parts wrong with it, I don't know. Now here we've got a wire going to something. I think this might be to do with the battery. I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't actually know this computer very well, but this has got something here that's been taped over. So if I actually remove this tape, we can kind of see what's underneath. And because I've got no idea what's under here, but it's all a little bit of a mess. And well, it's just two wires soldered together that have come apart. So yeah, I'm not sure what all of that is about. But it says here, do not replace battery, replace complete unit. So this could be the battery supply here. So that's probably where the battery connects. In which case, what I'm going to have to do is I'll probably get some sort of like a couple of double A's or something. Not double A's. Because I think it needs 3. I think it needs 3 volts, and I think you can just use 2 normal 1.5 volt cells and stick them in a container. I think that's what some people use, but we'll sort all that out in a minute. I'm saying I'm in no rush about that at the moment. Here's our ROM cartridge slots and our speaker, and as you can see, our speaker's a bit loose, but you know, that's not too bad. If we look at the main board itself, we can see there's a lot of muck on there, a lot of dirt, but there's no actual real sort of corrosion as such on the motherboard, not that I can see. And even if we look up here, it's, you know, it's fairly clean, and that would kind of indicate that, you know, it might work. This is our UHF modulator. Well, that I'm not going to even be using. There's our composite video output, and then we've got our other connectors here. I think these 3 connectors here. One of them is going to be the RGB, one of them is going to be the cassette, and the other is going to be the data RS432. There's our analog socket for the joystick. And then if we go to this side, we've only got 1 ROM in the set of 4 ROMs here, so I'm guessing that's the OS. So this machine might not even have BASIC on it. I thought it would have BASIC, unless the operating system's on another ROM somewhere else on the board. As I say, I don't quite know the layout of this computer very well. Here though, this is a real... Here we've got a real pile of grot. This is the keyboard, which is screwed down. And I'm going to untake it out. And this really is, you know, pretty mucky. Again, it probably will work. I have no reason why it wouldn't. It's just got very, very filthy. But then, you know, it's had like, you know, probably 30 years, maybe even longer left in a leaky roof, which, you know, is never going to be the most ideal thing. There's another screw down the other side here. And we'll just take that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a brush and a hoover, and we'll get as much of this dust and muck out as possible. I mean, if you look at this end, it almost looks like it's had some sort of pigeon living in it. I'll disconnect the keyboard, and it's on these 2 ribbon cables here. And then, hopefully, this should just lift out. Yeah, there we go. So this is our keyboard, absolutely caked in muck. I'm not actually going to tilt it because I don't want to get any more of this muck inside the computer. But we can actually get a better look now at what we've got here. You can see here, you know, it's just absolutely filthy. So the first proper job then is going to be removing everything from the case, and then I'm going to give the case a good wash. I've cleared most of the computer, but I just want to show you this. This is our decayed battery compartment. And as you can see, that's pretty minging, but it doesn't look like it's damaged anything else. And this has been obviously added by somebody at a later date. And I think it's great what they did, because they've taken off a soldered on board that could leak and cause problems. And even though this is of no use whatsoever and needs to be disposed of properly, it's not actually caused any damage. And so I think this would mean that we actually might have some success with this computer. With the power supply then, you can probably see there's a lot of rust, and that screw was completely rusted out, and I had to drill it out in the end. So we're going to now take the top off, and this is the first time I've seen it. That's the inside of our power supply, and underneath all the muck we've got a circuit board in there. I have no idea what it's going to look like inside beyond this, but yep, these screws will come out. That's good, because the one thing that always worries me is, you know, you start turning these screws and then and you probably really shouldn't be doing this on a glass top table either, because you probably scratch the glass. But you know what, I've scratched this so many times already, I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference, as long as I don't break it. Okay, I managed to eventually force this out by just stretching that bit of metal there, and I also bent these legs back here on the case. So now we've got this out, we can push these wires in, and hopefully we can actually see the other side of the circuit board. And if we look inside the case, we can see that's absolutely filthy and rusty, so that will all need cleaning up as well. Again, I might use the WD-40 trick on there to try and get rid of some of that rust and just give it a good scrub. However, this is our power supply, and on the surface it is dirty, but I kind of think it might still work. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is absolutely filthy. I mean, you can barely see what's written on the capacitors there. If we look at our motherboard, I mean, that's not looking in too bad shape. We'll look at the base, and yeah, apart from the obvious dust and muck that we will clean up, it's not looking too bad. I'm going to take this adapter off. Well, that's the end of a cable, actually. You know, the back of that's looking pretty clean. We've got our Ethernet, our audio out cassette, RS432, RGB, 1986. It's dated, and yeah, the main board actually doesn't look too bad. I think this might be okay. Well, I've given everything a bit of a dust and a vac now, and things aren't looking too bad, it has to be said. What I'm going to do though with the keyboard is, the keys are quite mucky, and so I will take my phone and I'm going to take a photograph of the keyboard, because I want to remember where all the keys go. And obviously we've got the keypad here, and we've got these keys here. Thankfully they are actually all different. I don't think there's any keys that are identical. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently remove each key just by using a pair of pliers like that. And they do generally come off quite easily. So we just gently ease these all off. And then you can actually see under here already, if I just bring the camera in a bit, You can see there's quite a lot of muck and crud underneath, but I think the switches are probably not too bad because they are pretty reliable, these mechanical switches. But again, it's just going to be a bit time consuming. Remove all the keys and then I'm going to give them a very thorough clean. With all the keys removed, you can see there's still quite a bit of grot on the keyboard, which I'm going to vacuum out again using the method of a brush and a vacuum cleaner. Right, with that all vacuumed out then, that's as much as I can really do at the moment with this. Now, the reason I haven't taken out the space bar is because it's got these sort of metal bits on the side, and I think you kind of bend them to take it out, but I don't really want to mess about with it. It's now the next morning, and the first thing I'm going to show you is that we have now a pretty clean case. I'm really pleased how this came up. It's got no real sort of stains or anything. It has got some yellowing on the plastic, which of course, you know, happens with all this sort of stuff. But if we take the lid off, you can see the underside of the case there is absolutely spotless. And the underside of the top case is nice and clean as well. And I'll just flip over the other side of the main case. And yeah, that's looking pretty good as well. So really pleased with how this came out. All I basically did was I scrubbed it with some soapy water, and then I took it into the shower and gave it a good rinse, and then left it overnight to dry off. So yeah, really pleased with the case. Now here I've got the plastic piece that goes in under the cartridge slot holder thing. That's all nice and clean. And here I have a complete set of very now clean keys for the keyboard. They all look fine. They're nice and clean. There's no muck and dust or anything on them. And what I can do now is I will put all the keys back on the keyboard. I will then remount the motherboard in the case, and then it's all about rebuilding the power supply. Onto the power supply then, and on here I gave it a good clean using a large paintbrush and some warm soapy water, and I then gave it a thorough rinse and then dried it out with a dehumidifier, and I really think it's come up pretty well, bearing in mind it was just black with muck. Now I can actually see all the components, and it's going to make life a lot easier for when I do the recap work. And to recap this power supply, we're going to have to probably desolder this daughter board here to get access to all the capacitors and then replace them all. And as for the actual case of the power supply, which we have here, that's come out pretty well as well. I mean, there's still a few bits of rust in there, but I basically just gave this a scrub with a Brillo pad. And again, it's not perfect, but it's an awful lot better than what it was. So yeah, I think that'll work okay. So I've got to also remove that bolt there. That was the bolt that we started to drill out. I'll just get some pliers or something and just take that out. And then I'm going to have to replace all the bolts on here that hold it together, but I've got plenty of them, so that's good. So next thing then is to recap the power supply. Well, I bought this a while ago and I just haven't opened it yet. This is a capacitor kit from Retro Clinic, Mark Haseman. Now, if you had a BBC Micro and you wanted to get it repaired, Retro Clinic would be the first place I would think about going to get it done, because Mark did 2 of my BBC Micros and he made an absolutely excellent job at it. These are all our parts then. We've got these 2 tie wraps here. These are the ones for tie wrapping the cable to the side of the case. We've got 2 2-watt resistors here, and these obviously need to go on the board somewhere. We've got a couple of chunky capacitors here, 250 volt capacitors there, 200 microfarads. They're going to replace, I think it's these 2 here on the board, if you can see, these 2 here. We've then got some other capacitors. We've got the riffer capacitors. These are the ones that sit across the mains and blow up and go smoky. So we've got those, and we've got some other electrolytics. So yeah, complete set of kit of parts that we can then use to get the power supply hopefully up and running. And it's going to be a case now of me desoldering parts on the power supply and replacing them. And with a bit of luck, it should all be good. With all the bits together then, this shouldn't be too much of a task to put together, so I'm going to get on with it. I have a feeling this recap job is going to be a real pain, and this is the first pain. Now you might be able to see these two bolts here, this one and this one. These hold the heatsink on for the regulators and the diode. Now they've been soldered in, they've been screwed in, and then someone stuck a blob of solder on there. Now this one I've managed to get most of the solder out, so I should be able to get a screwdriver in there, but I haven't been able to clear this one out, so it's going to take a bit more work with the older braiding to try and get it out. But you know, that's just something that's totally unnecessary. There's no real reason. They might say, oh, it's for mechanical strength. It isn't. It's so whoever owns this can't replace parts themselves. That's why they've done it, and it's a real nuisance. Well, I said this power supply was going to be a total pain, and it is, because it's actually different to the one that's in this brochure. I know there are variants of these things. The main thing is this daughter board thing on the side isn't on the one that's I've got the diagram of, and also that the layout of it is different. So what I'm going to do is effectively look for each capacitor, and I assume that the actual circuit is going to be very similar, and all the capacitors in this bag are going to be the same, and I'm just going to replace them one by one, because that's all I can basically do. Well, a few weeks have passed, and I would never admit I failed, but I kind of did fail on this. I got so frustrated trying to get the solder off those screws to take the heatsink apart that I thought, I've had enough of this. And what did I do? I sent it to Mark at Retro Clinic, and I got him to do it instead. So now we have a lovely refinished power supply, new on-off switch, lovely new mains cable, fully tested, fully working. So whatever happens now, I know the power supply is fine. Here's our keyboard then, and now I've cleaned all the buttons and put them back on. It's a lot nicer now. It's lovely. It looks really good. There's no muck or anything. And I cleaned the panel as best I could. Now, when I looked at the back of the keyboard, we could see there was a lot of these sort of grey areas here. I'll just zoom in for you so you can have a look. And I was concerned that that might have been corroded tracks and corroded traces. Right then, the moment of truth. I have absolutely no idea whether this is going to work or not. I've got the BBC Master here, I've got it plugged into that monitor, I've got the power cable here. Now the switch on the back of the computer is switched on, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch it on using my extension lead, just so that my hands are nowhere near it, just in case something really horrible happens. So here we go. Okay, the computer switch is on, and we've got a load of shash on the screen, but it is working. If I go control break, there we go. Acorn MOS, this is not a language. Now, I wonder if I type in star, well, it's not doing anything at the moment. Only things like control and brake are working, not the actual keyboard. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I think the main problem is this keyboard. When you switch the computer on, even with the keyboard not plugged in, it's more or less functioning as it should. But all this sort of muck and corrosion along here is not right. Now, I did wonder if the computer had the wrong ROM in it, but it doesn't. You actually have to have a battery backing everything up, backing up all your settings, which is connected here. And also you need to do a full reset, and that's by pressing the R key as you turn the power on. Well, obviously, because I haven't got the keyboard working properly, I can't do that. So this is the next stage. Fix the keyboard. Right then, I've done a bit of continuity testing on the board here around the corrosive area. And to help me, I took a photograph of the board, and I had that up on my computer screen. And having the board on the computer screen is a bit like having a microscope. It means I can zoom in and just look at where all the traces are on the board, and I can easily follow through and check continuity. Now, at these points, here to here, there was no continuity, and there was no continuity between here and here. and that is where I think our break is. This is the escape key here, and these are two function keys, but I think that the way this works is that it's scanning the whole keyboard at the same time, and if there's any break in continuity, then nothing's going to work. That's kind of what I think anyway, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't quite know how this keyboard really works. Round here, all this seems to check out okay for continuity. However, I will join some hookup wire on this, and if it doesn't work, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refloat most of the solder joints on the board. Now, the other thing I checked continuity for was the keyboard cable itself, and to do this I just had a croc clip cable with a piece of wire on the end, and then a piece of wire can go in the slot, and then I can use my probe on the other end, and everything on here checked out absolutely fine, so I've got no problem with the cable at all. There's the repair then on the board. It was 3 traces that were broken, and I'm now going to pop it in the computer and we'll see if it works. Keyboard's in place then, let's switch it on, see what happens. Not a lot, let's power it on again. I mean, I am suspicious that the keyboard encoder chip may have gone, because you would think some of the keys might work, even if not all of them work, because of broken traces on the matrix, because the matrix is literally just a load of crisscrossy wires, there's nothing else. I changed a chip that's just under here, it's a 6522, and that's the interface that goes between the keyboard controller and the computer itself. Now, when I switch it on, it comes on, and every time now it's that size font. I can go break, press break, and occasionally, like there where I got the half, the odd key will sometimes work. I'm going to turn it off and press R, which I think resets the machine. No, it didn't work, but something is working better than it was, because it's not coming up with anything else other than that, and it's not coming up in different sizes and things. So we're getting there. Now, the chip I put in is like a fairly new chip, but I'm a little bit suspicious of some of these overseas chips, and I've got one here which is an older one, which actually came from the guy that I bought the BBC Micro from ages ago, the one that I've done a lot of work on. So I'm going to try that one and just see if that makes any difference. Okay, I've got a different 6522 in there now. This is the one that I just tried, which may be alright, I don't know. And it might still be the keyboard encoder, but this certainly behaved a lot better. So if it was the keyboard encoder as well, then I know this chip's a good one. But anyway, I'm going to plug in the keyboard again. I didn't replace the keyboard encoder, but there was a buffer chip in between the keyboard encoder and the I/O chip, and I replaced that. Well, as you can see, it's coming up with the ADFS logo, but caps lock's working, shift lock's working, so I'm confident the keyboard is working. Now, I think if you press, is it H when you switch it on, it resets? This is not a language, but the keys are working. The keyboard is working. There are a few that aren't, so it's back to the soldering iron. Well, a lot of time has passed since I last did any work on this BBC Micro, or rather Master, but I'm in a good position now. I had to replace some of the keys on the keyboard. These are the old keys here, these things here. And they were all very, very manky and not very good. So I ordered 4 new keys from Retro Clinic, and I replaced them in the various slots on the keyboard. Now, they're quite easy, they just solder in, so you just find the key you want, desolder it, push it out and pop the new one in, so that was easy. Now, other things that aren't so good, I am having trouble getting this to read my little GoTech drive here. And I think it might be some sort of filing system error. I'm not sure. It keeps coming up with an error. However, if I use a blank image on the GoTech, I can write to it and read from it no problem at all. So I'm not quite sure there. But I was able to do quite a few things with this machine, and I'm going to tilt up to the screen. And as you can see, it's come up with a mode 7 in the filing system. I made a battery backup for this. In fact, if I just tilt down there, I can show you the battery backup's here, and it feeds into here, and the positive goes through a diode which is under there, and that is to stop any reverse power going back into the battery. And really should change the batteries every year in this. So that's all working. The memory's all working. I've been able to go through a lot of the commands to set it up in the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, I can't get the disk drive to work on here, but I can do this. If I go star card and go star dot, then I've got my Music 5000 software in there. And if I go star boot, nothing's working. Well, I'm really no expert on how stuff works on these things, but I've got a ROM image here, and I know if I go star ROMs, that shows me the ROMs inside it, and you can write to these ROMs. And if I type in star SR, get caps lock a sec, star SR load ample 8000, and if I stick it and say socket 4, there we go, it will then copy that ROM image into one of these sideways ROM things. And it takes a little while. In fact, if I tilt the camera down, you can see in there the LED here was actually flashing. Anyway, it's done it now anyway. Let's get the thing in focus. Now, if I type in star ROMs, you can see it's there, ROM ample 48. Now, I think you have to go control break and then go star ROMs again just to check it's there, and it is. Now, if I go to star card and go star dot, there's my Music 5000. And now if I go star boot to load it, should be uppercase, I think. Well, I'm not sure actually if it makes any difference. It's now loading my Music 5000 software off the card in the same way that it does any other program. So basically this computer is working. Now it's probably still got a few more niggles that I need to sort out, but for the state that it was in, I think I've done pretty well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run this with the card, because I don't quite know how the Now, the main problem that I probably had with the GoTech drive was the filing system formats, because you've got SSD and DFS and various other bits and bobs, and there was just an incompatibility in how I had that set up. And I can tell you that it does actually all work with a bit of a fiddle. And the bottom line is this: if I type in star card and go star din 52, I think it is for that image, star dot, there we go. If I go shift break, it loads up Chucky Egg instantly, which is a great thing to see, because obviously being somebody that grew up with a BBC Micro and only a cassette to load data in from, it used to take a fair old while. But now this BBC Master's working. Press the space bar to start, and we need to go to K to change the keys, because I always like to go up, down, left, right, and return. Press S to start, one player, and let's see how badly I can play Chucky Egg on a BBC Master. Well, I've got to say then, I'm really happy that this computer, which probably hasn't been used for 30 years maybe, is now basically working, and I'm really chuffed with this. I've always wanted a BBC Master, and I really like the fact that, as I said, this computer rather, came from a friend of mine who I've known an awfully long time. And like I said, it was left in an attic and it had some damage, and I got it working again. And yeah, it's brilliant. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. I dare say this computer will probably appear again at some point with another piece of kit, who knows. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with this yet. I mean, it will run the Music 5000 software, it will run any BBC software, but I think I should probably end up using it with stuff kind of designed to go with the Master, and I'll have this set up separately to my BBC B. But that's something for the future anyway. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.